Tim, welcome to the podcast. It's been a long time coming, and I'm so glad to have you.
Absolutely. I appreciate it so much. I know we have so many friends in common, and we just haven't ever crossed paths really. And so it's awesome to finally get a chance to hang out.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And thanks for including listeners in that hangout as well, which is always the fun part. So you say that one of the questions you always get asked is like, what are you doing now, Tim? And you've had a lot of different careers if you think about it, because up until your early 20s, you kind of had a singular focus. I mean, Jesus, obviously, but football, right? It was football, multiple Heisman winner. Let's talk about the last decade and a half and catch people up. And this is a question that comes up a lot on the podcast. How do you figure out what your next step is?
Carey, it's such a good question. So for me, it's something that what I really tried to do is follow the passions that God's put on my heart and the callings that I believe he's given me. And a lot of people say, well, how the heck do you know what he's calling you to do? That's a hard thing, especially in the church world. We throw out calling all the time, but what does that even mean? And for me, the way that I break that down is, what are the moments when I felt like he's pricked my heart and he's opened my eyes? And for me, that really started when I was 15 years old and I was in the jungles of the Philippines, and I had the opportunity to meet a boy who was born with his feet on backwards. And that day changed my life because I knew that I had the chance to meet that boy and fall in love with him for a reason. And because he was born with his feet on backwards, his village viewed him as less than, as cursed, as insignificant, as a throwaway. But I just knew God was putting on my heart, Timmy, he's not a throwaway to me, and he better not be a throwaway to you. And I didn't know what to do, but I knew this is what you're supposed to do. And you're like, what does that even mean? I just knew that boys and girls like this boy matter so much, and they're worth Jesus dying for. They're worth us fighting for. And so I didn't know what that meant. And, I probably lost, track a few times along the way. But the first thing that I did when I graduated from college was start the Tim Nieuwhof Foundation, which our mission statement is literally, it's one of the easiest things that I've ever done, because all I did was I thought about that boy. And when we wrote our mission statement, all I did was picture where he is and what he needed. And our mission statement is to bring faith, hope, and love to those needing a brighter day in their darkest hour of need. And so that's the first thing I did when I started college. And even though we were playing, professional football and then professional baseball, and then getting a lot of chances to do a lot of other, amazing, fun things, that has really been something that I believe is such a big part of my life purpose and my life calling. And it's been something we've been doing over the last decade. And so I would say that's been a big part of the last decade.
So let's talk about the foundation, because, often, Tim, that becomes the career move you make in your late 30s, early 40s, maybe your 50s. You've kind of had a good life. You've made a lot of money. You start a foundation. You do that as soon as you graduate from college. Was that weird for people? It's like, wait a minute, you're 20 what? And you're starting a foundation? Yeah. Like what kind of response did you get to that?
Well, honestly, there was some support. People were like, oh, I guess that's okay. Congratulations, good luck. But I would say on the other side, there were a lot of people that were critical, not of starting a foundation, but of how broad our mission statement and how broad our goals were. And I still remember right down the street from where we are right now in our offices to this day, we had the ceremony and cut a ribbon and blah, 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 some fun stuff. And I remember the questions I got. Well, how do you think you'll actually be successful? You got to either do hospitals or orphans. You got to either do orphans or special needs. You got to do special needs, or you got to do the throne. You can't do this. And I just remember thinking, and I don't think I'd ever really said it before, but I said, you know what, we really want to trust that we serve a big God. And you know what, when you serve a big God, big things are possible. And I don't know how we're going to do it, and I don't know if we'll be successful, but I know that we serve a big God, And I want to have a big goals because I don't want to limit my God to a Sunday. I don't want to limit my God to a steeple. I don't want to limit my God to, 2,000 years ago. We serve a big God. And, I don't know what he's got in store for us, but I do know that he loves people and he has called us, and not just called, he has commanded us to also love people. And, when we look at the story of the Good Samaritan, after Jesus is done telling the expert of the law about the Good Samaritan, he looks at him and says, go and do the same. And it is a command. In the Greek, it is a command for us when there is someone, like that, like the man was that was beaten and left for dead. He is told, go and do the same. We are told, go and do the same. And so that is what we have been called to do. When people are hurting, when they are less than, when they are viewed as cursed, when they are thrown away, when they don't have a home, when they don't have refuge, when they don't, they can't have faith, hope, and love. We know that it's our job, it is our calling, it is our command to go and do the same, to be able to provide for their needs, to love them in the name of Jesus, and then get the chance to share the good news of Jesus, which is the best message ever in the history of the world.
So I talk to a lot of young leaders who have a similar heart to you. They want to start a nonprofit. They want to start some kind of charitable thing that's going to make a dent in the world. And, a lot of them don't make it. A lot of them, they start, they fizzle, they don't find support. I'd love for you to break down a little bit sort of that process of starting out. Now, you had a huge advantage. I mean, I think I told you before we started recording and our messages back and forth or whatever, like I'm not a sports guy. So it's always a little intimidating when I have a conversation like this and I have to do extra homework.
That's okay. I guess I'm not one either too much. So it's okay.
Okay, that's funny. But, I don't, but I know as a guy who just generally followed what was happening in the news, you were all over the news. I mean, your double Heisman Trophy, your time in the NFL, it was like you only had to be a super casual observer to know that there were millions of eyes following Tim Tebow. But then there are millions of eyes following lots of pro athletes, football stars, soccer stars, baseball stars, and a lot of them, they just go off into security or insignificance, I was going to say. So what is it that really helped you gain traction with the foundation early on? Or did you gain traction with the foundation early on?
I think number one, just by the grace of God and opening doors. And then I would say number two would be the amazing people that we get to serve. And number three would be the amazing team. My name is on the front door, but honestly, it shouldn't be. That we have such an amazing team that are so called, that are here, that are amazing, that are it truly is so many of our team's life mission, to bring faith, hope, and love to those needing a brighter day in their darkest hour of need. And when people get to hear the God stories of what God is doing and the lives that, get to be transformed and the amazing people we get to serve, I feel like God's stories are contagious and people want to be part of it, not because it has anything to do with me, but, because it is we all want to be part of something special. And so I think those are three things that come to mind of, us in our journey. And I also want to say, Carey, I think we, made a lot of mistakes along the way. We didn't know a lot. We could have done certain things faster. We should have done certain things better. We didn't know a lot, but I also think that we tried to be transparent with people, the whole time as we were growing, and we've adapted, and for us, it really started at the beginning with being able to, our heart was that boy Sherwin that I met at 15. Sherwin was his name, and I knew we were supposed to fight for boys and girls around the world like him. And so it started with the WISH program and orphan care and special needs, and then into a hospital. And we didn't know, one day that God was going to open our eyes to the horrible evil of human trafficking. But along the way, there's been so many initiatives that we've continued to move into, not because our mission statement changed, but because our heart was pricked and our eyes were open to so many more needs that also is exactly what we are called to. I didn't know that over a decade ago, my dad was going to be preaching in an underground pastors conference in a remote country where faith isn't allowed. And, he's in this underground, teaching these pastors how to share their faith. And because it's underground, there's, men that come in that with, these young girls, and they start auctioning them off. And so my dad sees this, and he can't help but, it's one of the reasons my dad is one of my greatest heroes and role models, is because my dad's not someone that can turn and look the other way or turn and say it's somebody else's job, but he knew at that moment he was called to do something. And so he took out all the money in his wallet, which was $1,250 at the time, and he purchased the freedom of these 4 girls. And then he calls me and he says, "Hey, Timmy," and I said, "Hey, Dad, how's the trip going?" And he's like, "Oh, it's good." And I'm like, "What are you up to?" And he's like, "I just bought 4 girls." And I'm like, "What are you talking about, Dad?"
Dad, yeah.
That's not your average, Monday conversation. And I said, "What?" And so my dad tells me the story. And I knew that day, even though it was just on the phone, Carey, I knew that God just opened my eyes to such a need. And he just pricked my heart. And he said, "You're supposed to do something about it. You have to answer this call. Don't put down this phone. Do something about it." Not long after, I had the chance to fly to this location. And I remember thinking like, "Oh, we're going, and this is like Taken and Liam Neeson, and there's like, all this." And then you get there and you realize, you know what? Yeah, some of them were sold by some terrible people, but the majority of these young girls were sold by their family or loved ones. And it just opens your heart, and it wrecks you, right? And then then I start thinking, and this was, several years of me kind of wrestling through this. Carey, how do you tell a young girl, how do you tell a young girl what love is supposed to look like when the person that sold her is her dad? How do you tell a person what a heavenly father is like when that's her earthly father? How do you tell someone that a mom is supposed to nurture her when, for one of those first 4 young girls, she didn't make enough money one day and she comes home and her mom boils out her eye? How do you, h- h- how do you tell someone? How can you reframe their view of what a heavenly father, of what love, of what family, of what hope, of what faith, of what these words that sometimes we take for granted, how amazing it is for the blessings that God has put in our life. And we realize, wait a second, how can I share it with someone when what their view of what love is actually betrayal? And that's something that wrecked me for a long time, and I still want it to wreck me, because when God wrecked me with that, He also inspired me to do something about it. And so our team is working so hard in that area, where just this year we were able to put up 18 more safe homes, and we're building, and they're doing rescues, and we're restoration, and there's so many of these young girls and boys, and they're getting chances, and that's it's not because of me, it's because we have an amazing team and 23 official partners around the world that are just going out there and serving the least of these. But man, what crushes me every day, there's an estimated 40.3 million people that are trapped in one of the greatest evils in the world, and that's human trafficking. And most people would believe that it's actually more than that now. And you know what? That's something that does wreck us, because every single one of those girls that's trapped in human trafficking, on average, it's been estimated that they will get abused 5.3 times per day. So why do we have to have such an urgency? Is because one more day might be we're hanging out on a Wednesday afternoon. That's just a day where I get to talk to you. But for her, that's 5.3 times of terror, of a nightmare, of something worth us having a sense of urgency. And Carey, we have 5 non-negotiables at our foundation, and our third non-negotiable is, we call it a rescue mission. And why we call it a rescue mission is because, first and foremost, Jesus came on a rescue mission for humanity. Like, we don't need to get it twisted. Jesus didn't come down here to just have some dudes follow him or perform some miracles, or, he did all that stuff. But the greatest reason he came was on a rescue mission to rescue us from what we could not rescue ourselves from. And we need to always remember that we could do nothing in our time of need, and he did it for us. And that's why it's that's why the gospel is so contagious. He did for us what we could not do for ourselves. But we need to also understand, and my pastor says this all the time, once you've been rescued, you're on the rescue team. If enough of us realize that we're on the rescue team, meaning we're on the rescue team, that we get to be co-laborers with Jesus and get to go share the greatest message in the history of the world. And my dad would always say in markets growing up all around the world, he would always stop people and say, I want to tell you about the greatest trade in history, the greatest trade, and it is the greatest trade. We're our Savior wants to trade your sin for righteousness. It's like, wait a second. It blows your mind. It's incredible. But then also, we get to be a part of helping people in their darkest hour of need physically, so that we can tell them about the greatest rescue mission that Jesus went on for them. And so that's why we call it a rescue mission. And why we also say that is because when we say rescue mission, it puts a timeline. Because when's the last time you heard of a rescue mission taking place in 5 years? No.
Yeah.
When you say that, it puts a sense of urgency. And that means right now, we don't know how much time we have. We don't know when God calls us home. We don't know how much time our neighbors have, right? That's why we have to act. We have to live with a sense of urgency. It's something that it spurs us on as a team, as a family, because, while we sit here, we wait, others are hurting. And we don't know how much time they have. So we don't want to live on our timeline. We want to live on theirs. That's why we say rescue mission.
I could go in a lot of different directions here, but I love breaking things down. And clearly, the intensity that you brought.
Right, I get fired up too.
Oh, you do get fired up, man. I'll tell you, it's great, Tim. But the intensity you brought to football, the intensity that you brought to baseball, the intensity you bring to your work on ESPN with the sports analysis you do, and some of the other endeavors you do in your life. Obviously, you've got that intensity running in the foundation. But, and I think that underscores what a clear and compelling vision can do. I mean, that rallies people, it attracts people. But you also mentioned some struggles. And I love talking to successful people like yourself, because it almost seems unrelatable. You know what I mean? Well, of course, Tim is going to do this and it's going to have a global impact. He's going to have an amazing team. He's going to raise millions of dollars that can go to people in need. But you mentioned you had a couple of failures. Do you mind talking about some early stumbles or some misstarts when you started the foundation?
Yeah. I mean, there's been, in so many different areas. I mean, it could be in, goodness, even with, for our first hospital, which was so exciting, it was the Tebow Cure Hospital with our partners at Cure International. And it was, in the Philippines. And it was so that every boy, just like Sherwin that I met, every boy and girl, in the Philippines and hopefully surrounding areas could have a place free of charge to have, get their physical needs met, emotional needs met, but also spiritual. And so even when we're so excited, we're galvanizing and we're rallying people and let's do this. And for all these kids that will never get, hope and healing. And yet along the way, we had so many, steps where it was like getting stuff into ports and tracking and locations and ups and downs. And you're like, oh my gosh. And our partners at Cure were awesome and being able to figure it out. And, that's one of the reasons. And I would say one of the things that we've learned along the way. And so it's become a non-negotiable for us is number 4 is we say there's power when we come together. And why it's so important is, one, when you come together, ultimately it's not about the credit, it's about the mission. We feel a lot of people don't work together. They're more worried about the credit than the mission, and the mission's always got to come first. But what we've learned along the way is there's a lot of amazing people doing a lot of amazing things, and we don't always need to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes we can come around other people and we can be able to pour gasoline on them so that fire can burn even brighter. And sometimes there's nothing in place, and so we need to develop something, like Night to Shine. We didn't know anything like that. We saw 2 churches do it, and so we thought, man, this would be amazing if we could spread this throughout the world. And I'll share one setback just this last year because it's so relevant. But just about a year and 2 weeks ago, I was playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I was so excited. I was like, man, this is going to be a great opportunity. We're going to do amazing things. God's going to use it. I just thought, hey, God opened these doors. I mean, I talked to a bunch of pastors. They thought, yeah, do it. I was like, okay, awesome. And I'm doing it. And then I get cut. And Carey, I got to be honest, I was so disappointed. And it wasn't just disappointment, it led to bitterness and frustration and being upset. And yeah, still being able to, talking to God, but really meaning it, I'm not sure. But literally right at that time, literally, I think it was maybe a couple hours after the news starts to break about Afghanistan, everything happening in Afghanistan. So I come to the offices and we're meeting, and we have, some of our teams are already on the ground and other teams are flying to get on the ground to evacuate and help people and get them into safety, and just everything with the safe homes and getting people into other countries. And so, not long after that, I have the chance to get on a plane and fly to the Middle East. And I remember, going and wanting to go serve and make a difference, but still being a little bitter, to be honest, Carey. And
Thank you. Yeah.
and then we're at a location, evacuee site with all the evacuees and the refugees, and I'm seeing so many people that I mean are in their darkest hour of need. Kids that have been trampled, women that are bleeding, people that have been gone through a lot. I mean, it is trauma. It is, certain places there's people that are, passing away where we are, and all these people are trying to help and help and help. But it is severe trauma. And then I remember getting on a plane and flying to another country so I could help our team in another country. And it was the first time in a little while where I could say, God, thank you. Thank you for letting me get cut. Because I know if I wouldn't have signed with the Jaguars and then have gotten cut, I wouldn't have had the freedom to instantly get on a plane and fly to the Middle East, because I would have had something booked. I would have maybe been talking to you, Carey.
Right, your calendar was open.
Calendar was open because I wasn't expecting to get cut. And so I had the opportunity. And you know what I was so reminded of in that moment is, in my mind, I thought that it was God had set me up to be a Jaguar, and then it was a setback. But actually, it wasn't a setback. In my mind and in my heart, it was a setback. But actually, it was just God setting me up for what He's ultimately called me to do. And in my human eyes and my flesh, and it's not always bad to want to play a sport and love it. But you know what? I was letting that define me too much in the moment. And ultimately, when I was flying from one country to the next in the Middle East, I could just say, because I remember what God had called me to when I was 15, He's stirring it up again. No, Timmy, I never called you to go just play a game or win a game. You're here to love people. And it's never just been about a game. And I just remember being so impacted. And this is just a year and 2 weeks ago. And, I was just so impacted, and even, just needed to confess of just, I'm sorry. It was about me. And I was disappointed. And honestly, I was mad at you because I thought this is what we were doing, and then it fell through. But actually, you were just setting me up for what actually you wanted me to do in that moment. And I was so grateful, because it also gave such purpose to the sadness and purpose to the disappointment. And that was, I know, a little sidetrack to the question you asked, but I just thought it was so relevant to the moment only a year ago, where, you know what, sometimes we just get so caught up in what we think matters, and we don't actually know what God's doing. That's why even when we can't see it, we have to trust Him. We have to trust Him that, God, you're in control. And I don't know what's a setback. I don't know what's a comeback, but I know you're in control. And however you want to use me, please use me. And let me try to have the vision and the compassion not to get overwhelmed with the disappointments or what we feel like are the disappointments, because ultimately you're in charge. And I want you to use me in those different ways.
I really appreciate you going there, Tim. And to the extent that you're comfortable, I mean, you're zeroing in, comfortable talking about it. Let me finish that thought. You're zeroing in on something I think every leader can relate to, which is not being cut from the NFL. I mean, not a lot of people have that opportunity, but it's like the church didn't grow like I thought I would, or I started a business. Like 70% of all businesses fail in the first 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, most of us have got setbacks, hurts, disappointments, disasters at some point in our background. And I mean, you've had a very successful life by many measures, but you've had your share of disappointments too. I mean, you know, when you win the Heisman Trophy, you think, great, I've got 5-10 years in the NFL ahead of me. And that doesn't work out the way you think. You end up playing baseball for a while, which was great. But like, I wonder if you could walk us through what happened inside you when the dreams you had in your head didn't play out in real life the way you.
Yeah, such a good question. I would say that at times there's disappointment. At times there's questioning, like, wait a second, God, I thought we were gonna, win some Super Bowls, and it's like, oh, not exactly, and it's disappointing, and at times you feel, one, it's easy to lose perspective on what really matters, and perspective is something that is so important, and perspective is something that is so hard to gain but easy to lose.
Mhm.
And then I would say, from that, of losing bits of perspective, it starts there. Then all of a sudden your identity starts to get put in other things. And there was definitely a piece of me at times where, maybe not all of my identity, but pieces of it were definitely starting to identify as a football player, as a quarterback, as these things. And so when that's taken from you, it's all of a sudden, wait a second, who am I? And more importantly, whose am I? And your identity. And when you place your identity in what you do and it's taken away, then you're 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 someone that needed crutches, and now I don't have anything to lean on, right? And
Mhm.
it's just so important that we don't place our identity in our own achievements, our own relationships, our own accomplishments, our own, even our own occupations. But our identity is found in our relationship with Christ, because He is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and His love for us will never change. And so therefore, when our identity is based in the love of Christ for us, then our identity is never going to have to waver in that, because His love for us will always be the same. And while my identity is based in His scars, not mine, then my identity is something that is also going to last, because I'm not defined by my scars, I'm defined by His. And so that was something that was really a molding learning process for me, in that, where, and man, I would lose perspective. Even especially times, in New York, when you're playing for the Jets and there's all this stuff going on, and man, it's just so easy to think, that it's all about this, or it's all about me, or I got to figure this, or what happens, and so hard to say, God, you're still in control, in the
Mm.
disappointing moments, and even in the high moments. And it was cool. Certain times I've been able to look back and see different things I couldn't see in the moment, and still see, wow, God was weaving that throughout all of it.
Yeah, it is interesting, how to keep yourself. And I really appreciate what you're saying about identity. I heard Rick Warren say, and he's been a guest on this podcast a few times, but, Rick said years ago, never put your identity in something that can be taken away from you.
Yeah.
And that's like, your career can go, your ability to walk can disappear, your family can disappear, like, all of that. And it's really good advice. But you are caught up in those circles in professional sports, whether that was baseball or football. So take New York. You as you were talking, I was thinking back to an interview I did with Terry Crews, the actor who also played in the NFL for a while. And Terry said that the NFL is like prison with money. I thought that was a really interesting take. He basically said, sort of gangs and that attitude, except everybody's rich now. How did you resist the getting caught up in the hype, or were there moments where you got caught up in the hype and found you having to bring yourself back down again? Because that can happen. Honestly, you can have a church of 200 people, or you can have a business with 200 employees, and you think you're the man or you're the woman, How did that go for you, Tim? And then how how are you managing to re-ground your identity throughout? Because I think it happens to all of us.
Well, I think so much of it is so important in your walk and who you're able to do life with and who you let speak into your life and what you actually listen to. I think those are such keys in trying to not lose perspective because it is so easy to lose and it happens so fast. And I'll give you one example. Is at the University of Florida, we were blessed, with a lot of success. We won a national championship my freshman year, sophomore year Heisman Trophy, junior year national championship, and our goal was to win another one my senior year and be the best ever, win 3 out of 4 national championships. And, that was something we didn't shy away from. We were striving for. And we go undefeated, number 1 team in the country all year. And then we go 12-0, get to the SEC championship and lose to Alabama. And obviously it's disappointing, but I will also say I feel like there was a big piece of my identity that was lost in that game. And to make a long story short, the next week we're in Orlando for the Home Depot Awards. They give to the best college football players around the country, and you all fly there for it. And there's a waitress that she comes and she taps me on the shoulder in this kind of banquet room, and she's so nervous. And they're like, "I'm sorry, they told us not to bother any of the players." And I said, "No, ma'am, it's okay. What is it?" And she said, and I'm like, "It's okay." And she's so nervous to tell me, but she said, there's a really amazing young girl that she has severe things that she's fighting, and she didn't even know how to say it. And I said, "It's okay, ma'am." And she said, "You could tell she's fighting a lot of different issues, and her and her family drove from Virginia to see you. Any chance?" And we're in Orlando; it's a long way. And any chance you'd come see her? And I said, "Of course." So I get up and I walk to the back of the room, and they open these big doors, and in comes walking this young girl named Kelly Fawnin, who's still amazing friend and sort of family member with us to this day. Her and her family, the Fawnins, are amazing. And Kelly was a young girl who had brain tumors, had tremors, she has overcome more in her life than I could possibly fathom or imagine. And she is an incredible young girl. And she's so excited to see me, but she can barely take the next step. She's shaking so much, and she's so focused on taking the next step to get to me. And she's shaking and shaking and shaking. And finally I get to her and I put my arms around her and I give her a big hug, and she gives me this huge hug. And honestly, it was one of the best hugs I've ever had. She probably hugs me for a minute, and then she starts crying and I start crying, and her parents are right there and they start crying, and my parents are with me and they start crying, and no one's even said a word yet. And then I start talking to Kelly, and I finally meet her and I hear her name and hear her story, and I'm just so inspired. And so I say, "Kelly, if it's okay with your parents, would it be all right if you be my date tomorrow night for the red carpet and the award ceremony?" And thankfully she said yes. And the next morning, my uncle took her and her family, get her a dress, and they got her dressed, to be the belle of the ball. And all of us went to dinner, and then we went to the red carpet, and everyone's cheering for her. And it's amazing, Carey. It's just like the best night ever. We're just having the best time. We're laughing, we're cutting up, we're just celebrating. It's awesome. And then the award show starts, and we're literally seated row 1, seat A, and she's right beside me, and her family is a few seats over, and my family is a little bit right behind me, and it's just this awesome night. And that night, I believe I was up for 6 awards, something like that, and they announced the first award, and I lose. And I was like, it's okay. It's not even about that. Tonight, it's about Kelly. It's about Kelly. They announced the second award, and I lose. I was like, all right, it stings a little bit, but it's about Kelly. The third award, and I lose. And now I'm starting to get irritated. And the fourth award, and the fifth award, and I lose. And my mom's sitting right behind me. She can tell that it's all coming back. You see, what had happened, Carey, is I was so bitter and irritated and upset because up until I was able to meet Kelly, for however long before it was all about me. It was all about my disappointments. It was all about what I didn't accomplish. It was all about, the legacy and all of the things that we lost, right? And I lost perspective on ultimately what mattered. My identity didn't come in winning or losing that game. As much as people want to make it, and we have amazing fans that will kind of make wins and losses identity, but it didn't, my identity wasn't gone in that loss. But then when I met Kelly, it all changed, because for the first time, Carey, and I don't know how long, I wasn't thinking about myself anymore. The focus wasn't on me. And then when I started to lose, it all came back. And right before they announced the 6th award, my mom's sitting behind me and she leans forward and she whispers in my ear, "Timmy, you already won tonight. You just don't get your award till heaven." You know, what she's not talking about this college football. I genuinely can't even tell you what it's for right now. But in the moment, it was everything, right? But ultimately, it's not, because that night was not about any award. That night was about Kelly. And that night was about being able to love her and serve her and her family. And you know what? She's such an amazing young girl that she has now raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to serve other people that are going through life-threatening illnesses. She's a mama bear to so many of our wish children that have life-threatening illnesses, and she'll get their numbers and she'll call them and she'll inspire them. You know, it was one of the best, times of my life where I got to be inspired, because my perspective went from being all about me, what I had, to what I lost, to now being about someone else. And so, I share that is because when I think about how we lose perspective, it's most of the time not out there. It's in here, because all of a sudden I'm looking inward at what I got or what I lost. But we lose perspective when it becomes about us, because ultimately life's not about us, but we want to make it about us. And so I'm so grateful that Kelly in that day was able to change my perspective from being all about me to actually seeing her that day. And I'm so grateful for that. And so I just encourage all the listeners, man, when, I have with one of my close friends, when something negative happens to me, and in a very, public setting, that I lose get cut, or there's a disappointment or something just that happens, we have an agreement that we're going to meet, and he's going to take me, and we're instantly going to go serve, regardless of how I feel or what I want or what I'm going to do. We're going to instantly go serve somewhere at that moment, because the greatest way that you can regain perspective is to go serve, because it will automatically take you out of the perspective of life's about me. And so much of the time when we lose something, we're disappointed because it's about us. Now, it's okay to be disappointed at times, but when it changes perspective or it changes identity, then we need to change that mindset. And so that's something that we've kind of put into place as a practical tool to try to get out of those funks.
I really appreciate you sharing that story and the perspective, because I know when we were talking about what we were going to talk about on this episode, you said, make sure we talk about the foundation. I'm like, absolutely. But I can see, I don't know. Have you ever read the work of Henry Nouwen? Not trying to put you on the spot. Do you know that name?
I do know that name, but I haven't read much of him. No, sir.
Oh, I'll send you a book. We usually send a gift to podcast guests. But, Henry Nouwen was very well known in academia, was sort of a rising Roman Catholic priest, and then went on a retreat in the 1970s. He died 25 years ago. Yeah, easy. 25 years ago. And as his academic career rose, he was really having identity questions, like, who am I? And, really. And he ended up moving from the US and coming to Canada and living just north of Toronto at a community with adults with profound special needs. And it was there that he found Jesus the most. It was there that he could take his focus off of himself. And I wonder if there's a similar parallel journey going on in the life of Tim Tebow, because on the one hand, you could have it all, right? I mean, you played pro sports, you've been in and out of the NFL, you did professional baseball for a long time. ESPN loves to have you on, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a pull, isn't there, Tim?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, the most fulfilled I've ever been in my life is when we have the opportunity to serve, especially those with special needs, or orphans, or thrown away, or neglected. For those lives, it's when it's almost like God reminds me, this is what you're supposed to do. This is what's important. This is what really matters. And I'm so grateful for that because you know what? Sometimes I just miss the mark and I'm stubborn and maybe, and I don't always get it. And so I need to be reminded. And so God kind of stirs it up again and stirs it up again and stirs it up again. Um, but I also think, Carey, that's why, Moses writes to the Israelites and 22 times tells them, remember or do not forget. Like, don't you think if you were the descendants of those that were able to see what God did and seas parting and all of this stuff, like you're gonna tell your kids and your kids are gonna tell your kids and they're never gonna forget. You're gonna be like, we saw this is incredible, and then they're like, mom and dad saw this, and like grandpa and granddad saw this, and like this is crazy, right? And you're not gonna forget, but Moses had to remind them, remember, do not forget what God has done. And I have to tell myself that all the time because it's so easy to get caught up in the next and the next and the next. And we need to, first of all, look back and remember the cross, that the cross counted for us. Like the cross counted for us. That's how much we're loved. But then it's also look at our lives and just see how God's faithful and his blessings and how he came through, because that reminds us what he's done and it encourages us of what he's going to do.
So a few other questions I want to ask you, Tim. Working out, it's obviously physical fitness has been an important part of your youth, but sometimes that's easy to let go. You haven't let it go. Talk to us about your workout nutrition regime and how that's fueling the everyday, even when you're not on the field right now.
Yeah, I love that. It's something that's honestly super important to me, not because, how you look matters that much, but because we're called to be good stewards, and stewards isn't just of our time, talent, and treasure. It's also of our body. I believe everything we eat or drink is either giving life or taking life, like we can't add a day to our life, but we can't add focus to our days. We can't add energy to our days. We can't add mindset to our days. All of those things are fueled by the fuel that we give ourselves, and so we need to give ourselves the right fuel. And I believe stewardship is also with our body. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to have a six-pack, but I do believe that if we put in the right fuel, then it's so much easier to say yes to the right things with our attitude, our effort, our focus, our mentality, our mindset. All of that matters, right? And, how could I think if I just put in things that aren't going to actually fuel me, how do I possibly think that I could be the best on the mission that God has called me to? Like, you still might be good, but are you going to be your best, right? And that's always a challenge for everybody, for all of us. For so much for me is, I just, I've missed it so many times and fallen short so many times, but I want to strive to now moving forward to try to be just to be the best I can for the ones we're called to serve, to be the best I can for, to represent our Savior. And I'm so far from that, mess up so much on that, let him down so much, but, forgetting what is in the path, moving forward with a directed purpose, and striving to be my best on the race that is, in front of me, trying to be my best and running as hard as possible on the things that God has called us to. And, that's something that is so important in our mindset, our fuel, what we eat, all of those things it's nourishment to the mission that God has called us to. And so I encourage the listeners, maybe it's to lose 10 pounds. Maybe it's to put on a little muscle. Maybe it's to just exercise. There's so many studies on how exercise, helps, thought patterns. There's so many studies on why it's so important for us to be healthy and how it prevents so much and how it, so I just encourage, everybody. Stewardship is not just something we should preach from the pulpit about our money. It's something that we should live out, yes, with our money, also with our relationships, also with all of our talent, but also in our own bodies.
What does your workout routine look like these days, Tim?
On a perfect week, I could lift 6 times. I don't always have perfect weeks. And so sometimes it can be cut down to, 4 or 5. I love to be able to do that on, On Mondays, it'll be lower body, like speed and explosiveness. Tuesdays, it'll be push pull. Wednesdays, core. Thursdays, lower body again. Fridays, shoulders. Saturday, arms. And so that's kind of the way it's broken down. And I love the diet aspect of it, because I think that so much of our nutrition is based on our fuel we put into our body. And so I'm on a ketogenic diet. It's a modified keto. I have a little bit more protein than most ketogenic people, but it's something I've been on for over a decade, and I love it. I just, I think it's really important we eliminate so much of the bad sugars that we eat. I could share you stat after stat after study with that. And so I think that's really important. And when you can eliminate so much of that bad stuff, it's amazing, first of all, how many foods that's in. And then second, how much better we feel when we can eliminate so much of that.
It's interesting, I tried keto for a month, and that's another story for another day. And I think one of the reasons my voice still doesn't work 100% a year later, but I found, peak nutrition and what you take into your body, probably the best I've felt is when I've done the Whole30, which is really interesting. But I want to talk about being in ketosis. So theoretically, if you're on a ketogenic diet, you're in ketosis most of the time. Mm-hmm. What do you notice? First of all, can you define that for people who don't know what it is? And then secondly, go into some of the benefits?
So when you're in a state of ketosis, it's because your body is very low on sugar and carbs. And so it switches from sugar and carbs as your fuel source to burning fat as your fuel source. And so some of the good things of that is when you get in that state, your body releases something called ketones and ketone bodies. And actually, it's pretty cool. Now, not only can you have them when you're in a state of ketosis, but actually, there are companies that make exogenous ketones, which the chemical formula for that is beta hydroxybutyrate, short for just BHB. And it's amazing. If you ever try it again, I would encourage you to try to take BHB, because it'll really help with, sometimes people call the keto fuel, the keto flu and stuff like that. And so that's something that some people go through, but I would encourage you that can really help. But it's something that I like it because not necessarily as much for my body, but for my brain. Your brain, so many times we think what we eat just affects our body, but it also so affects our brain. And I love being able to follow the modified keto version because of the great fats and the MCT and coconut oil and avocados and ketones and all of that for your brain. Because not only do I want to be active for a long time, Lord willing, but I also want to do everything for my brain. And Lord knows I've already hit too many things with my head, and so I need all the help I can get for sure. And that's another reason why I really love the diet.
Okay, a couple more questions for you, Tim. What are you learning being married? You've been married for how long now? Not long.
A little over 2.5 years, and I would say so much. I think that, it's funny. One of the things we get asked all the time is, when we first met and started dating, it was very easy to notice we didn't necessarily have the most in common. And a lot of people would take that as a negative, right? And it's true. I mean, I wouldn't know any of her favorite songs. I can't even speak Afrikaans, and Demi being from South Africa, she doesn't know my favorite movies. She's never seen Braveheart or Dumb and Dumber or Gladiator or The Patriot or Remember the Titans. She has seen Remember the Titans now. And she loved it, by the way. But we don't know each other's favorite songs or restaurant. And that's okay, because what we found out is even though we don't have that much in common, we have so much in purpose. Like how God has designed our hearts for what we care about. Those that are being trafficked, God had pricked our heart for the same thing. For the special needs, her little sister had severe special needs before she passed away, and actually was our matchmaker. And so many of the things that we're called to is the same. And it's like, it's awesome to be able to sit down and watch a movie and laugh about it, hang out or play games. But it's so much more special and intimate and awesome when we get to go, serve these babies in Africa that have been thrown away, or hug these women in Asia that nobody wanted, or be able to, serve all the night to shine kings and queens. And you know what? I thought I loved her when she was walking down the aisle, but then I realized, especially just this February, I was watching her we're in one of our baby homes in Africa, and she's all these babies who have literally been thrown away or just hanging on her. And I was just like, oh my gosh, watching this, I love her so much more, and I think it's, being able to have things in common, awesome. Have things in purpose, so much better.
It's a great way to look at it. You've also, in your book, Mission Possible, but also in this conversation so far, you've referenced your dad. And in the book, you talk about your parents. It seems like there's a very healthy relationship there and a lot of respect. Talk about what it takes to have a healthy relationship with your mom and dad at this stage of your life.
I think it starts with just massive, massive, massive amount of respect. I just respect him so much. My dad being my greatest hero, not because what my dad would tell us, but because what my dad showed us. My dad has pretty much given his entire adult life to helping people that can never do anything for him. And he's done it with such determination and in the face of such obstacles and even health difficulties, and he's just so faithful to it. And when God calls him to something, he is all in. Like, what's so funny, Carey, is some people even say to me, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're so bold. I even got an award last year for being bold." And I literally was telling people, I am literally so far from bold. Like, you want bold? Go talk to my dad. Like, I was the kid when we go to a restaurant after church, and and my dad would stand up and everyone could hear him pray at our table, and I would like scrunch down like, oh man, he's so loud, and like, I am so far from bold, but my dad is so bold, and he's so bold for the gospel, and he's so bold for people, and he's so bold for his family, and he's so bold for the hurting. And it's something I've seen, not because he told us, but because I got to see him live it out. I got to see my dad, in the face of people saying, if you preach, we're going to kill you. And he'd tell them that God loves them anyways. In the face of having no money, and yet he still would give it all away. In the face of those things, I got to watch it. And that level of respect is just so high. And so he's a hero because of those things. And then with my mom being, so faithful of a mom with me and my 4 siblings, and being able to serve us like crazy in the mission field. And then when we moved back, and being able to see my mom, sing verses to us every night and put them to tune so that, we could memorize them easier. And I can't help but memorize them because they're to song. And so I would literally, like, every now and then I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm singing this song. How do I know this? Oh, that's right. My mom sang them to me every night. That's how I know it. And then when my mom would say, hey, don't gossip. Don't say mean things about other people, and then I would be like, how rare it is to even think back my entire life and think, I don't even know if I've ever heard my mom say something bad about someone else.
Wow.
And so it's like, those reasons are what I hold on to. I don't look back at necessarily all the teachings. I look back at all the life lessons they had. And that's where it starts, is just this extreme respect for them and wanting their advice, their godly advice, and their, and I call my parents all the time just to get advice. I called my dad just the other day to say, Dad, what would you do in this situation? And, because I want their advice. And, my dad, made us memorize the first few chapters of Proverbs when we were young, and he made us do it. He knew we all love sports, and he would make us memorize a piece of it before we would play that weekend. And if we didn't memorize it, we couldn't play. And he knew I'd do it to play. And
Our dad.
I'm so grateful for that. I hated it at times in the moment, but I'm so grateful now. And that's some of the reasons they're just such heroes of mine.
Wow. So I got to ask you this: who still calls you Timmy? I've heard you reference yourself.
All my family.
All your family. You're Timmy to your family.
Oh yeah, And if you've known me long enough to be around me when my family's there, you start to pick up. You start to all of a sudden start to say Timmy. So no one called me Tim my whole life till the media started calling me Tim. And then it was like every now and then I would introduce it, but it was just easier. More people know me as Tim. But in sports, everybody just called me Tebow. It's just last name, just Tebow.
Yeah, Tebow.
That's
Yeah, it became a verb at one point too. So there you go, Tim. That's great. All right. So we do have tens of thousands of church leaders listening. You partner with local churches.
Yeah.
And if there are leaders listening who want to know how to partner with the foundation, what do they do? How can they bring a night to shine to their church? Yes. How does that work?
Well, thank you for asking. Night to Shine it's my favorite night of the year. It's actually how me and Demi met through our first Night to Shine in South Africa. She says her little sister and I say Night to Shine. But Night to Shine, what it is, it's a worldwide celebration for people with special needs in hundreds of locations around the world, and we want to have it in your church. And when we really felt like God pricked our heart to do this, we really were like, where should we have it? And we kept coming back to the church, the church, the church, the church, because we want to empower, we want to equip your church with hopefully the best night that these kings and queens, because every single one of our honored guests are kings and queens, every single one of the king or queen of the prom we want the best night of their life to be at your church, so that they come back on Sunday and the next Sunday and the next Sunday, because ultimately we want to empower the church and we want your community to go to your church. And so it is just our heart that we can connect the church with the special needs community, a community that's 15% of the world's population, that is the most overlooked, thrown away population in the world. And, we think that they don't have enough love here in the U.S., but man, when you go to other countries, I could tell you thousands of stories of them being tied up, chained up, thrown away in wells and basements, kids that haven't been let out of the house in over 10 years, but in honor shame cultures where they're actually having something that honors them for the first time, they would be let out of the house to be able to go to Night to Shine because it brought honor to their family. And so Night to Shine is really my favorite night of the year. And if your church wants to get involved, go to timteofoundation.org. Sign up, get a hold of us. And our goal is to make it as easy as possible for every single church. So we give you a rep member that will talk you and walk you through literally everything. We send you so many gifts. We give you a manual. We walk you from A to Z, and even, support so many other churches that are out there doing it. And so we want to make it as easy as possible for you to love the least, the last, the lost in your community. So if you're interested, please, contact us, because we want every single boy or girl to go to being a king or a queen. And by the way, there's also not any age cap on it. So we've even had kings and queens that have been in their late 80s, early 90s. And so it's truly my favorite night of the year.
Tim, this has been a fascinating conversation. Anything else you want to share with leaders who are listening before we wrap up?
I just would say, I just hope that all the leaders are encouraged, man. It's, I totally get so many questions you have referred to of Christians with setbacks or people leaving their church or different things. And I just want to encourage all the leaders that, man, it is hard and it can be disappointing. But remember, there's a difference between your job and God's job, right? Your job is to give everything. Your job is to be a steward. Your job is to love people. Your job is to have the mindset. Your job is to stay in the word. Your job is to bring nourishment. But God's job is the one that brings the results, right? And ultimately, remember that God's in charge. And you might feel, unequipped or ill-equipped or you know what? Our God is a big God that, man, he used a lot of people that felt like that in the Bible. And so don't think that you've done anything that God can't use, And I just encourage you that our God is a big God. And our God is just, I don't think he's looking for perfect people, because if he was, man, I would never make that list, I'm so far from perfect. But I'm encouraged when I look at the Bible, because he also chooses to use a lot of people that aren't perfect. But one thing I do think that our God is looking for is willing people, so I just encourage the leaders out there, man, that, you might feel, beat down or sometimes even broken or not enough or disappointed. But man, let's just be willing together as messed up, fallen people. Remember that God's grace, it counts for us. Let's be encouraged. And let's remember that he's not looking for perfect. He's looking for willing, and we can all be willing, and it's so easy to look back and get discouraged at how many times we messed up. But you know what? We're not defined by that, and we don't ever, when we know Jesus, we don't ever get defined by that. And so let's just be encouraged, and let's look forward, and let's do it with a willing heart and, an inspiration to move forward. And so, my heart just, honestly, that's a passion for me because, I know that, so many people are going from church to church in different places. So, just be encouraged, leader, wherever you're at, that, what, the results aren't yours, they're God's. And you know what, you just keep being faithful.
Tim Tebow, thank you so much. It's been a joy.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you, man. We'll do it again. Only if you want me. I don't know. Maybe you don't. So.
Oh, I want you. Are you kidding? I mean, we're at time, but I got a lot of questions. This has been fantastic, Tim. Thank you. And a real encouragement. And I really enjoyed connecting the dots of what really makes you tick to date. And that's very convicting, very inspiring, and very encouraging. So thank you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man. Thank you. And to all the listeners, appreciate you guys. God loves you like crazy.
Thanks so much for watching the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so. Share it with a friend and leave us a comment. And I've got 2 things I want you to do before you sign off today. Number 1, if you're a church leader, would love for you to go out and visit hegetsuspartners.com/Carey. Click on the link, because here's what's happening. There's a $100 million campaign going on, basically sharing the gospel with the world. And if you become a partner for the He Gets Us campaign, here's what happens. People who are interested and respond to the ad get connected to your church. It's an opportunity for you to enter into dialogue, have a conversation with them, people who are really authentically exploring Christianity. So go to hegetsuspartners.com/Carey. And also, if you haven't yet checked out the Art of Leadership Academy, make sure you do so. The Art of Leadership Academy has over 150 high quality, done for you resources for you and your team. Whether you're leading a church or whether you're leading a small business, you're an entrepreneur, it's done for you. I will train you in communication. I'll train you in team leadership. I'll train you in so many different things. We have PDFs, videos, downloads, cheat sheets, you name it, we've got it. It's ready to go. But it's beyond that. The Academy is also a community. I do live monthly coaching calls. We have an incredible community involved in daily dialogue. It is troll free, and it's available for a very low membership fee every single year. Would love for you to check it out. Make sure you check out theartofleadershipacademy.com. Click the link and we'll see you inside there, because here's why I started it. I graduated law school. Nobody taught me how to run a law firm. I graduated seminary and nobody showed me how to run a church. Had to figure it all out. So that's why we created the Art of Leadership Academy. It'll help you lead and help you thrive as you do it. Thanks so much for watching the podcast. We'll catch you next time. And I hope our time together today has helped you thrive in life and leadership.